Hi class, this is a review of everything that will be on your test. The first part of the test will be solving quadratics by factoring. The first step in factoring is to always look for a greatest common factor. And here we have a greatest common factor, which is r. Remove the r and you have r plus 6 equals 0. And then after it is factored, you set each part equal to 0. R equals 0. R plus 6 equals 0, and solve for R. Subtract 6, R equals negative 6. So your two answers will be 0 and negative 6. Next type is trinomial. Leading coefficient is something other than 1, so we will do the slide, divide, slide. So we take the 5 and slide it. And we have m squared minus 12m plus 20 equals 0. And then factor. M squared is m times m. What multiplies to give us 20 and adds to give us 12? That would be 10 and 2. And both signs should be negatives. And then don't forget to divide by the 5. And then simplify your fractions. M minus 2 times, and here will not simplify. Move the 5 in front of the m, so you have 5m minus 2. And now it is factored, and we set each part equal to 0. M minus 2 equals 0. 5m minus 2 equals 0. Add 2. M equals 2, add 2, add 2, 5m equals 2, divide by 5, m equals 2/5. So 2 and 2/5. Next part of the test will be solving by taking square roots. And in this part, you only have one variable and it's squared, and you solve for that variable. So we're going to subtract 6, 64, k squared equals 100, and divide by 64. So that k squared is equal to, and we can reduce that fraction. 4 goes into each part. 4 goes into a 100 25 times. 4 goes into 64 16 times. And then once k squared is by itself, we solve by taking the square root. And when we take the square root, we want both answers, the positive and the negative. And when we take the square root of a fraction, you take the square root of the top, which is 5, take the square root of the bottom, which is 4. So our answer is plus or minus 5/4. Next part is solve by completing the square. To complete the square, leading number must always be 1. If it is not 1, you would divide the entire problem through by whatever that number is, that leading coefficient. When we complete the square, we move the constant to the other side. So n squared plus 12n equals negative 11. Leave yourself some space so you can complete the square. We take half of 12 and square it. Half of 12 is 6, squared is 36. We add it to both sides. And then we factor. This factors into a perfect binomial square. So that's n plus, what did we square to get? 36, 6 squared. And then negative 11 plus 36 is 25. And then we solve by taking the square root. So that n plus 6 is, and when we take the square root, we want both answers. Plus or minus the square root of 25 is 5. And then we solve for n. N equals, we're going to subtract 6. So that becomes negative 6 plus or minus 5. And since These are just regular numbers. The radical went away. Go ahead and calculate your two answers. Negative 6 plus 5 is negative 1. Negative 6 minus 5 is negative 11. Another example is one that involves a fraction. And this one I'm going to need more space. So I am going to do it on a separate sheet of paper so that I can have room. So here again, leading coefficient must be 1. Move the constant to the other side. So that will give me m squared minus 19m equals 92. Take half, and since 19 is not an even number, so when I take half, I just write it 19 halves. And then don't forget to square it. You square the top and you square the bottom. When we square 19, we get 361. And we square 2, we get 4. And we add it to both sides. Okay. And then we factor. M minus, what do we square to get 361 over 4? We squared 19 halves. And now here we combine, so we have to rewrite 92 so that it has a denominator of 4. So all we do is multiply 4 times 92, and that will give us 368 fourths plus 361 fourths. And then we combine the two fractions. That becomes 729 fourths, and then we solve by taking the square root, so that m minus 19 halves equals plus or minus, and when we take the square root of a fraction, we take the square root of the top. In this case, it's a perfect square, which is 27, and then take the square root of the bottom, which is 2, and then we solve for m. And we're going to add 19 halves. Add it to both sides, so we get 19 halves plus or minus 27 halves. Again, the radical went away, so these are just regular numbers. So we go ahead and calculate our two answers. So m equals 19 plus 27, which will be 46 over 2, which reduces to 23. And then 19 minus 27 will give us negative 8 over 2, which simplifies to negative 4. So your two answers will be 23 and negative 4. This involves your fractions, completing the square. All right. The next section is solve using the quadratic formula. And to use the quadratic formula, the equation must be set equal to 0. And again, I'm going to do this on a separate sheet so that I will have room. When we solve using the quadratic formula, it has to be set equal to 0. So we're going to minus 22. So 5m squared plus 9m minus 22 equals 0. And then we identify our A, our B, and our C. A is 5, B is 9, C is negative 22. And then we need to plug it into the formula. The formula is negative B plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And then we plug it in.